Mugen TV News.
Hey guys, this is MugenLord here, and I'm back again with another video. And before we begin, I just want to thank all you guys for coming through on my YouTube channel and supporting the recent content I've just been uploading. I've just been on the ball lately. I've just been uploading like a video a day, like one video per day. It's been a while since I've been this consistent with my YouTube channel, and I think overall I've just been really enjoying it. And I even left in the community tab just thanking you guys and just expressing like how relieved that I feel that I don't feel pressure to cover whatever the latest video game news is, and I'm just sitting back and whatever comes to my mind at that moment, at that time, that's the video that I want to have a discussion about. And I like this type of method much better. I feel more relieved, more relaxed and everything, and I really thank you guys. But before we dive into the topic, for those of you guys who've been following me when it comes to my Final Fantasy VII Remake content, I just got my special delivery through the mail, the Final Fantasy VII Remake Materia Ultimania. This is pretty much like an ultimate Final Fantasy VII Remake guide as far as concept arts. There's also some story bits that the game itself doesn't even explain in everything in the game, but the Ultimania also have these juicy details. So I'll definitely want to go digging here and create discussion videos about certain topics that even the game itself doesn't explain, and it explains things here. I think this is going to be pretty cool. And also we also get thoughts, and we also get what the developers were thinking when going into this game. So the Ultimania is something we definitely want to dig into, and I also like the front cover as well. So we'll get into that much later. But now on to the topic. What are we talking about today? Well, today we're going to be talking about, which is a follow-up to my other video that I did, was the acquisition of Activision Blizzard that Microsoft had pretty much did recently, about like 2 days ago. This is a follow-up because we also get some other news regarding Sony. So with this topic, I want to just go through and ask you guys, how does this acquisition affect not only Sony but also Nintendo? And if it doesn't, why don't you think it doesn't affect them? And if it does, I definitely want to know in the comment sections how and why it affects them. So let's dive right into it. There's an article that appeared recently, like about a day or so ago, that Sony has lost $20 billion in market value following Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Now, that is definitely a blow. Definitely a blow. I can imagine that the shareholders just got scared, got nervous, and was like, yo, what the hell is going on? So we're going to read the article, and then I'm going to definitely give you my thoughts and how I feel about this, and give you my thoughts of how it may or may not affect Sony and Microsoft in the long term. We'll just wait and see. So it says Sony shares fell significantly after Microsoft announced its intent to acquire Activision Blizzard for almost $70 billion yesterday. The PlayStation company's stock dropped more than 13% on the Japanese stock market on Wednesday, January 19th, the most it's fallen in over a decade, according to Bloomberg. Despite Sony's continued success in Japanese market, analysts say that Sony may struggle to keep up with Microsoft if the company continues to go all in its Game Pass service. Falling shares illustrates investors are worried that Sony may not be able to keep winning if indeed the industry shifts away from hardware-based model. Morningstar research analyst Kazunori Ito told Bloomberg. So, and this is what I talked about before, like, it's going to be inevitable. It's definitely going to be inevitable that we're going to be moving to a more of a streaming based digital type gaming like future. It's going to happen eventually. There's not going to be a such thing as consoles anymore, and I said this in so many videos that eventually there will be no such thing as consoles. All it is going to be a service, similar to how you have Disney Plus, you also have Peacock, you have Netflix. You're going to have that. Each company competitive company is going to have their own streaming service, their own digital service, and you just subscribe to their service, and they'll probably most likely email you a controller, not email you, but mail you a controller, similar to how Google Stadia, doesn't have a physical console, but they have a controller. I think that's the route they'll eventually probably go. Now, Nintendo, on the other hand, we'll talk more about Nintendo after we finish this article. It wasn't all bad news on the market though. Other stocks saw bumps thanks to the acquisition. Capcom and Square Enix respective stocks were up more than 3.7% in Tokyo, which analysts attribute to investors' confidence in developers and publishers with strong game franchises and IP. But I also want to talk about Japanese companies when it comes to this acquisition. I definitely want to talk about this because it's crazy how this article right here mentioned Capcom and Square Enix, because I wanted to touch bases on that. Microsoft stock continues to be up 1.85% today thanks to the monumental announcement yesterday. In a news post announcing the intent to acquire Activision Blizzard, CEO of Microsoft Gaming Phil Spencer said that one of the company's goals for the acquisition was adding additional titles and IPs to the Game Pass. Duh, we said that before. Upon close, we will offer as many Activision Blizzard games as we can within Xbox Game Pass and PC Game Pass, both new titles and games from Activision Blizzard's incredible catalog, he said in the post. This massive investment in Game Pass could point the wider industry towards a Netflix-like model where users pay a subscription fee for a rotating suite of games rather than purchasing each game individually. So that's the end of this article. There's a lot of things I want to talk about, but we're going to stick to how it's going to affect, how it could possibly affect Nintendo and Sony. But there's going to be another video that I'm going to make is how a streaming service and how games are going to more digital is going to affect the future of gaming. I'm going to do that in a separate video, so stay tuned for that. But let us get right into this. Now, how does this affect Sony? We'll focus on this. The person that got hurt more than anybody else when it comes to the competition is Sony, not Nintendo. Nintendo is in a complete different league of its own. Nintendo is doing their own thing. They're minding their business. Now, before we even get to the Nintendo part, because there's a lot I gotta say about that. When it comes to Sony, yes, Sony has a huge library or great library of first-party titles. But the thing is, these first-party titles does not launch every year. So as Sony fans and just consumers in general of the PlayStation brand, in between while they're waiting for these first-party titles to release, players have other games that they can play, which are third-party games, third-party titles that they can play while they wait for the first-party studios to drop their games. And most of their blockbuster titles don't come out every year. So most of these companies and most of these studios from Sony may come out once a generation or twice a generation. So you need those games to fill in that waiting period for those titles. And when you think about it, Sony is known for having so much as far as third-party support is concerned. And when you look at Sony, games like Call of Duty sells much better on the PlayStation platform than it does the Microsoft platform. Sony was so heavily reliant on let's check this out. Most of these third-party publishers are more so more so Western developers. Sony had so much reliance on third-party Western developers, and Microsoft just came in and swooped and grabbed that. That took a major blow to Sony, and especially losing $20 billion in shares in value when it comes to their shares. Definitely says a lot. Because when you look at Diablo, Sony had Diablo titles. Look at Overwatch. Sony also had a multi-plat version of Overwatch on their platform. Call of Duty, such a big title that sells really, really well on Sony, which is a Western developed company that make Call of Duty, was pushing Sony platforms in a way. So with Microsoft buying another Western studio or Western type of studio, that automatically hurt Sony really, really bad. And now they have to find ways to make up for that. And that's where I would say that right now they're affected by it, but in the long run, if they get their bearings together, they can overcome what just happened when it came to this acquisition. Because believe it or not, guys, Sony is really pretty much no longer really a Japanese company. If you think about it, they moved their main company over to California, I believe. It's in the United States. Their main headquarters, they picked up and moved over here. When you look at a lot of their titles, it's losing more and more of that Japanese edge that they have. And Sony was known for being Japanese, being a Japanese company. And even when it came to their games, they had a lot of Japanese games. Most of the Sony games back in the day were more so recognized for their Japanese games. And it seemed like they shifted away from that because they wanted a piece of that Western market. And now Microsoft is buying up the competition. And now they would lose that Western edge, especially with big titles like I said, Call of Duty and Diablo, Overwatch, Candy Crush and StarCraft. That's a major blow. So now Sony has to figure out a way to counteract that. And when I say that in the long run, if they play their cards right, this won't hurt them as much as we think it could possibly hurt them if they play their cards right. Now, if you think about it, we mentioned before their first party titles that they have first party studios. Now, what they need to do is, if for them to overcome this, they would definitely have to take the studios that they currently have. They have Santa Monica Studio. I believe they're the ones that work on God of War and a couple other titles. Then you have Sucker Punch, the studio that worked on, I believe, Horizon Zero Dawn and also Ghost of Tsushima. And then now you also have Insomniac Games, which has Ratchet and Clank, and they also have in the Spider-Man titles that they have, and they coming out with plenty of other titles down the pipeline as well. So they really have to take these studios and build these studios up and really kick in the gears and start having these studios put out some amazing titles. And also they have a portion of Naughty Dog as well, so they really have to kick in the gear and actually start kicking out titles, build these studios that they currently have. People are going around saying that no, maybe Sony should go and acquire some other studios like Microsoft is doing. And I gotta keep telling you guys, especially the fanboys, the Sony fanboys, Sony don't really have the money like Microsoft does to be able to go around and start just soaking up companies. Now the thing is, they do have I believe 23 or something billion dollars set aside for acquisitions, but financially, would that make sense for them to blow that money financially? Because they don't have the money like Microsoft do just to swallow up companies like Pac-Man. They really don't. So is that would that be a smart financial choice to just buy competition just because Microsoft is doing it? I don't think that would be a good idea, unless there's companies like Konami or Blue Point, which I think they got Blue Point, I'm not sure. If they have studios like that they can get, then maybe they could do something. But if they just work with the companies that they have right now, the first party studios they have right now, and then start dividing these studios up into different teams and have them start working on titles, start hiring more staff, more workforce to be able to kick out these products or kick out these first party titles, I think they will still be able to stand up there, in the long term, to be able to hang in there and won't get too much affected by this acquisition. When it comes to first person shooters, now that Call of Duty's pulled out, they don't really have a first person shooter that they can have on their console. You know what I'm saying? So it would be smart if they get Guerrilla Games. That's what it is. Yeah, get Guerrilla Games to pretty much go back to the Killzone franchise and really build Killzone up to be their Call of Duty brand and really put a lot of work and effort in it. So they have ways they can get around it. But the main issue is they turned away from their Japanese roots. If Sony go back to start relying on Japanese companies and getting Japanese studios up, I think they'll do just fine regardless of this acquisition. But we will just have to wait and see. Now on to Nintendo. How does this affect Nintendo? And the answer is, it really doesn't. Nintendo is really in a league of their own when it comes to this. This acquisition had no effect on Nintendo at all, because when you think about it, name a Call of Duty that released on their console in a long time. Most of these games are Western developed games, and if you look at Nintendo don't have a lot of Western third-party games that really release on their consoles. Most of their games are first-party games made by Nintendo themselves, and also a lot of their games are also from Japanese studios. So they weren't really affected as much, and this is why I mentioned this is why I wanted to talk about Capcom and Square Enix. Nintendo is pure blood Japanese when it comes to their company. Even down to their business practice and everything, it's Japanese. So this doesn't really have an impact. This acquisition that Microsoft has done with Activision Blizzard, this doesn't impact them at all. Now, what Nintendo should be doing now, they need to really focus on creating relationships and strong and powerful relationships with Japanese studios. And like I said, when it comes to me as a gamer, I don't really play Western developed games. Most of them I'm not really interested in. Most of it, I guess you can call me old school, old fashioned, or whatever you want to call me. I more so play Japanese developed games. I just love Japanese developed games. They're fun, and especially with today's modern Western gaming, a lot of this stuff is political. You know, a lot of agendas in it, and it's just not interesting at all. There are a lot, like I'm really pulled away from a lot of Western developed games, especially with the censorship and all this other type of stuff. It's always controversy when it comes to these Western developed games. If you pay attention to what's going on, there's always a lot of controversy going on, and especially with the developers saying, if you don't like it, don't buy our game. We've seen what happened with EA with that. We see a lot of the controversy that goes on. If you look at Naughty Dog with The Last of Us 2, there's a whole lot of the stuff that's going on with Western developed games. And bad enough, like bad enough, I really don't play them like that. But now I don't even play them even more with a lot of the politics that surrounds these games. And Kotaku and Polygon, they don't make it any better, you know. So I stick to Japanese games more so, and that's why I think Nintendo definitely have the edge. It's their first party titles. You can't get none of their games anywhere. You can't even get them on the PC. Nintendo is a purebred video game company that have a lot of iconic IPs that keeps them afloat, and they also have a lot of Japanese studios that they work with. And if they focus on that, and like I said, Sony should do the same thing. Japanese developers have to definitely kick into gear and just put out a competitive, competent products against the Western developers as well. But Nintendo, this is nothing to them. They didn't get any of these titles at all, and Nintendo's gonna continue to be in their own lane like they have also always been. Now the thing is, Nintendo being in their own lane tend to have a history of screwing themselves over in the past, but it seems like with the Nintendo Switch and them being in their own lane this time around really benefited these guys. So this acquisition is going to do nothing to Nintendo at all. So that's all I pretty much got to say about this when it comes to this acquisition. When it comes to how it will affect Nintendo and Sony, it really doesn't affect Nintendo at all. It is affecting Sony right now in the short term, but in the long term, they can definitely switch it up if they work with the studios that they currently have. Build those studios up, split them, and make more studios if they can, and just have a crazy huge workforce so they can pump out games and go to the route that Nintendo is going, and be more Japanese and not too much Western reliant on titles, because this acquisition proved that. This acquisition definitely proved that they pull is a major blow to them, but they can definitely turn it around. So like I said, I'm a gamer. I love competition, and I don't have allegiance to one console or a piece of plastic in general. I have all three consoles. I have the Nintendo Switch, I have the PS5, and I have the Xbox Series X. And of course, I have a gaming PC. I have it all. I'm just a gamer. So it doesn't really matter, you know, as far as like this fanboy, console war thing that goes on. I want all these companies to do well, because if they do well, it benefits all of us. So that pretty much wrapped this up. And also too, I forgot to mention about Japanese studios. They also, Japan has a law that's set in place to where it's harder for outside like foreign companies to come in and acquire them. So Microsoft trying to acquire a Japanese company is going to be a little bit of a struggle, especially with the rumors that them may be acquiring Sega. We just have to wait and see. So the Japanese side really have to kick in the gear when it comes to the development of their games to be able to compete or whatever. But that wraps up this video. What do you think? Do you think that this is really going to hurt Sony, both short term and long term, or do you think this is just, you know, they can really come back from this and, you know, to still be able to compete with Microsoft, and especially with their Game Pass? And what do you think about Nintendo? Do you think Nintendo is going to eventually get hurt by this, or you think Nintendo is just fine and they want to do even better moving forward? So I definitely want to hear your thoughts. If you like the video, hit the like button. Also hit the subscribe button if you just like my channel and this content in general. And if you want to stay up to date with more gaming news when it comes to the competition between Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, definitely hit that bell to be notified. This is MugenLord signing off. I'll see you Game Fiends later. Peace out.